Hey everybody, this is Rydo, and we are back to another live stream of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel with video game news and every game that has come out on Steam in the past couple of days. Starting a little slow, starting a little late. For the accountability section, I'll say I played from the beginning all the way to the end through a lot of putting extra effort into it. The game Dropsy, which is a very weird point-and-click adventure game that Digital Devolver published after I think it was kickstarted. It's just kind of an insane game as a point-and-click adventure. It's far too open world for its own good. Its puzzles are dead simple. There's no dialogue or text in it at all, which is the thing that pretty much saves all point-and-click adventures, is when there's witty text and writing and dialogue. So to say you're not going to have any of that is ridiculous. To say you're going to have an open world is ridiculous, because that makes the puzzles way too difficult. This isn't much for 100 gems, but whatever. We'll just purchase these new decorations just so we maintain owning everything. Yeah, the visuals are creepy for no reason at the very beginning and at the end in very specific spots, but overall the game could easily have been for 6-year-olds because the puzzles are so simple. But then the story would have had to have been changed, particularly at the end, when they're actually shooting guns in a point-and-click adventure and having monsters appear for no good reason. It's just like a weird attempt at not appealing to anyone, I would say. Like it's far too easy as a point-and-click adventure game for older people who would be fans of point-and-click adventure games like me, and it's far too inappropriate for little kids that you might try to get into the idea of point-and-click adventure games. Even the name Dropsy is basically like saying the R word, the retardation word, which is no longer really considered acceptable to use. Even though personally I think I probably do still use the R word more than I probably should. Like, I'll have to be more careful, certainly not to use it as it's become more of an issue. Which, in all fairness, yeah, I get it. Like, there definitely was this punching down aspect of Dropsy as you're playing as a character who seemed like they were mentally disabled, and at points the game seemed like it was actively allowing the audience to feel like he was being made fun of. So yeah, I just didn't really like it, and there really isn't much in it in general as far as Dropsy to say anything more than that. It's not worth the breath to be spent further. I also said throughout the process of last stream on Monday that I was going to look to see if there was a plugin to make QR codes based on the webpage you're on. I looked for a few hours after the stream, found a multitude of plugins and extensions for Firefox that would on demand, i.e. you have to click a button every time, bring up QR codes for the web page you're on, but none that would just automatically bring one up or put it specifically floating on the screen. Like, ideally, I wanted a Firefox plugin that would just put a QR code right here. So after a few hours of trying every single extension I could find in Firefox's extension store, which I know there's other GitHub repositories and things you could probably install or try to make your own custom code. I couldn't find anything that quite worked. I did find several that would work if I just wanted to click the button, though. But throughout that process, I did see that there were some extensions that would put the URL in the title bar of the window, the Windows window. And so that was interesting, just something that I happened to notice. And in the process of seeing that, just an hour ago, I thought to myself, wait a minute, if I can get the URL into the title bar, can I read the title bar with a program in Windows? And it turns out there is a, I'll say, command prompt / PowerShell command called task list. And task list, with enough manipulation, can put out a comma separated value list of all the tasks that matches, all the processes. And then with a secondary command called, I think, just select, I was able to limit it down to the first line, well, the second line. The first line, skipping the first line, is basically what I had to tell it to do. So, in that process, I have now found a command that I could run potentially in Python, or in a script of maybe a Lua script in OBS to get the URL that way. So you'd install the extension to put the URL in the title bar, because it's not normally in the title bar. Usually what's just in the title bar would be the title of the page, and then it would say -Mozilla Firefox. So you have to manipulate that with an extension built into Firefox. Then you run a command in Windows to read the title bar. Then I'll run more commands to then get the URL. And since I already know there is a plugin in OBS that someone else has made, a script to make QR codes, I can then take the URL and encode it as a QR code using that code. So I'm just going to have to modify the code. So it went from wasting maybe 4 to 5 hours trying to see if everything was done by default to learning even one little tiny breadcrumb of a pebble of knowledge. And that, but because I learned that one tiny breadcrumb of knowledge, that after I slept on it, after I focused on something else for a while, led me towards the point I'm at now, which is hopeful to actually be able to get it to work. Now, inevitably, I haven't done any of the coding yet, so it could take another day or two to get the coding to work. But with any luck, by this time next week, I will have been able to program OBS to make QR codes, which is great. It's not going to be super amazing, I'm sure, to a lot of people. There is a problem, certainly, that you'll have to avoid as far as just resolution, because while the QR code may look nice to me, it may be too small to actually scan. And inherently, since most people are watching the videos on their phone anyways, you would have to have a secondary phone to scan a QR code anyways. But yeah, at the very least, that would be a way of quoting sources better instead of just saying it. On the other hand, it might just be a huge waste of time in my application, and it might be very useful in other applications. But it will be an interesting experiment, to say the least. What would be better is if YouTube itself just had deep linking abilities, and I'm not sure that there really is any kind of video format or anything like that. Inherently, we're more than likely going to run into a future version of the way the internet works, in which just all text is always being scanned and always being captured by optical character recognition, and even a picture of a web page is going to be so obvious that that it can be found. Face up defense position. I was trying to turn that one to face down defense position, and it apparently won't let me. The internet, at one time, I think people would argue this, or at least the original creators of the internet would argue this. The internet was at one point supposed to have nearly every single word on a web page linking to another web page, which that certainly would have gotten annoying, and most words basically should just link to your personal selection of Wikipedia as far as just explaining what things are. And we do have that, where you can right click on the word and search it, and that normally through a Google result will define the word if it is a generic word. But even here, if we were to just use this RetroArch release update notice, which I want to talk about, and I want to get into the news fairly quickly today. Like, you have a website here and an article here, and then the rest of this page is not linking to anything. Whereas ideally, this, and this would all link to at least a Wikipedia explanation as to what each of these icons mean in connection to RetroArch. Potentially just clicking on RetroArch should be a link itself. Words like has just been released all should potentially allow you to define them directly. And particularly when you start to get to changelogs and the detailed changes, which it does seem like there's a decent amount of changes here. It is always in a weird position whenever RetroArch or LibRetro, whichever name, updates, because you on one hand know they really can't do that much new. That there is only so much you can add and improve upon. Most emulation of most games are 100% accurate to what they were, and there's just no room to change anything that would make it inaccurate or try and improve upon anything. You can't really add that many new features, and inherently cross consoles wise, there just aren't that many new features that have been invented in the past decades. You have achievements, you have online streaming play, you have some experiments in VR, and you have maybe more force feedback with rumbles and things like that. But that's kind of it. Like, most of the features, in the sense that you get video and audio and background music and a certain level of graphics, most of those features are set in stone and have been in existence for a very long time now. And some of the things you would like to see happen with emulation are just a little too demanding, like a default way to download video clips for splash screens for games, which didn't exist originally, or download the proper labeling and information and getting a nice big database with accurate information is something you can certainly do, but it takes a lot of polish and a lot of effort. It's not an automated process by any means. Libretto also has an update announcement, which, yeah, same way. They're not getting really into the details of what can be updated. It is the Dolphin emulators, PlayStation, I think X, PlayStation here is probably a PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5 emulator more than a PS2 emulator. It might be a PS2 emulator or PS1. They are finding little things to work on still. Of course, every time you see one of these updates, it also highlights a problem that is only even now more exacerbated by the shortage of Raspberry Pis, which they did announce that they're going to have some more Raspberry Pis in stock, but at this point I think it would be kind of silly to buy a Raspberry Pi 4 when there's very possibly a 5 that would be announced by the time you could get the 4. It wouldn't be a real problem to buy some of the older ones, that if they're just making more of the old setups, if you want a 3B plus for instance. But any of the RetroPie setups are using very old versions of the libretto cores, and they can't really update them to the newest versions that easily. That I think they're slowly trying, but at the core of it, the Raspberry Pi is really a weak processor. We're also running into storage issues in that category. We need something like an M2 PCMI. Well, no, I don't know what it would be. We need something like a M2 stick that is just really short, that has a lot of storage, but is also fairly slow. And people are not really making those. Because ideally, I would like 4 to 8 terabytes that you could put into a RetroPie setup and just have a massive collection of ROMs of just like every ROM. And that's just not really reasonable to do with a micro SD card. Slow storage, even in old hard drive ways, is not getting cheap enough, fast enough. Let's see. Just end the turn there. Oh, I did want to also put out, we talked about this announcement from Gamatsu that Ushiwaka Maru versus Shikai Tono gameplay trailer is available. I found out after the fact that this Ishiwaka Maru character, I'm not sure if she is a Multi-Blood exclusive character, or if she is a crossover character from another game. But traditionally, her outfit has none of this midriff here. So there has been more censorship. And censorship in particular, if I can make a new argument against censorship in video games, is very unnecessary when you're making a fighting game and you control every single frame that would ever be rendered. But yeah, she has traditionally been shown as just having this kind of ribbon here and this ribbon here hanging over her chest, and then her entire midriff being exposed, including her cleavage and breasts. It's maybe an interesting thought to say, do you need censorship in a fighting game like Melty Blood? Like, it seems like so often the censorship that happens is to just avoid controversy, not even to get like a lower rating. But yeah, every single frame in these fighting animations would be hand generated. You would see them all. There's no way you're going to have that Janet Jackson nip slip type experience in a game like this, nor are you going to have the camera controlled by the player. So it is really the like worst kind of game that you would ever need to have censorship in. Meanwhile, this is a fighting game that's going to be played by hardcore fighters almost exclusively in Melty Blood as a series. It's not targeting teenagers, it's not targeting kids. It's not even, I think, the fighting game that you would expect at an esports fighting game tournament. And sure, maybe if you were going for tournament play, you would say alternate costumes. There are definitely instances I've heard of specific costumes not being allowed to be played during tournaments because they're a little bit too revealing. But to not even give the players the option of seeing the character the way they've been depicted previously is where you irritate your pre-existing fan base, who obviously had some interest in keeping the character looking the way they did previously. And yes, it does create the weird situation where anybody who is anti-censorship just comes off as a bit of a creep, whining about something that's just not that big of a deal. But that is inherently the slippery slope issue with all censorship, is that it'll just keep pushing it and it'll just keep pushing it, and it will never really be a huge deal because people who are anti-free speech and pro-censorship, let's just call it pro-censorship, can be very happy with censoring 90% of all art that's created and just allowing the Mona Lisa, for instance, to be unchanged. And they can always have those tentpole, well, we didn't do anything to that one, so yeah, that's a bad argument I'm trying to make. I'm not making the most amount of sense because Mona Lisa isn't really likely to be censored, but there is a certain point where it would censor. It is not untrue. I mean, it is totally true right now that some of the Muslim countries that are run by the most extreme Muslims are actively trying to destroy 10,000 plus years old artifacts, and just destroy all of humanity's history, not just that country's history, because all of humanity mostly did come out of the Middle East. And that their form of censorship isn't just, oh, we're going to take a statue of an ancient Mesopotamian goddess and put her in a burqa. No, they're going to burn down and smash and turn to rubble the entire statue and the temple it's in, or any ruins it's in. And yeah, there is that level of censorship, which almost everybody would be against. And it is all coming from the same attitude and thought processes. So if you're going to be anti-censorship, if you're going to be free speech and art at all, you have to protect everything, and you have to fight on the war front that exists now. And right now, one of the war fronts as far as censorship versus free speech is video games, and in particular Japanese artists or animators in general, in depicting more lewd outfits and more skin. And inherently, we have to admit that free speech advocates are losing the battle. There's more censorship than ever in the past couple years in video games, and it's not just video games. And that is a problem. Alright, and I guess I'll leave that as today's daily rant against censorship. I want to burn through the news fairly quickly today. There's Amazon Prime is giving away 10 free games over Christmas, including Dishonored 2. I think it already covered this. Looks like we may have some redundant articles once again. I think I misunderstood that the $50 off here also is kind of from a base price of $250. So the Xbox Series S all digital version is still a little too expensive. I would highly suggest, at this point, I doubt anybody could purchase anything online at all and get it before Christmas without paying extra shipping and extra priority. Maybe you could get it then. But I would highly recommend getting an Xbox One or an Xbox One X used instead of getting an Xbox Series S. And if you're rolling in cash, just get an Xbox Series X instead, even though there's really no discount there. Let's see, the Witcher 3 Next Gen update have full patch notes at videogameschronicle.com if you're interested in that. Apparently they're already doing some either beta testing or this patch is out, and they are getting some reports of bugs in the new update that I assume were just not there originally in the game. So in their next gen update, they seem to have added some unexpected bugs, which is a shame. We talked about Returnal's PC specs, recommending 32 gigabytes of RAM. Generally, I would recommend 64 gigabytes of RAM for people that like to open a lot of tabs, but yeah, 32 gigabytes is good. I would be hesitant to buy any pre-built computer, if I was going to buy a pre-built computer, with less than 16 gigabytes of RAM with room to add another 16 gigs later. But yeah, 32 is the right number. Faster RAM certainly also is a comparison. If you've got a computer and a CPU that's particularly an AMD CPU where the RAM is more connected to the CPU speed, having something that is running at 4200 versus 3200 versus 1600 megahertz, I mean, you're going to have major differences in your experience even with the same amount of RAM. So if you could get I would say at least 800 megahertz more by cutting your RAM in half. You probably are better off doing that. Now also I would say buy specific brands of like Corsair RAM and not cheap RAM that's claiming very high speeds. Inherently, a lot of people do buy very fastly rated RAM and then they don't go into the BIOS and set it up to use the XMP profiles, which means they're just running at a very slow default speed. And yes, well, that technically is overclocking. My BIOS at this point has a default AMD overclocking that's on by default, and I didn't change any of the settings, and the RAM XMP profile is a default overclocking. The next generation of PC hardware really should have locked in, I think, the specs more than it did, and the next generation of PC hardware really should lock in it a lot higher. So when we're getting to a point where we're at DDR6 instead of DDR5 being a possibility, and we're approaching 6, 7, 8 gigahertz CPUs. Honestly, if you're pre-building a computer, I'd also say 6 cores is probably more than enough. 6 cores, 12 threads. 8 cores is a little bit better. Don't go any higher than that, because so many programs use 1, maybe 2 cores anyways. As far as gaming, you would have to have very specific software designed to use multi-threaded, multi-core processing. Usually that would be like video rendering and nothing else to really justify that. 4 cores, 8 threads is definitely, I think, livable. 2 cores, 4 threads, though, I would say is not livable. And there is also the mobile comparisons just not being anywhere close to what the desktop versions are. So anything that's in the laptop that has numbers that somewhat seem like they're in the same level as a mobile desktop version, really they aren't. Laptops just add more problems with batteries and poor cooling, and I just don't think most people need laptops, even though most people want them. Let's see. This looks like a new story. Microsoft has reportedly offered Sony the right to put Call of Duty on PlayStation Plus. The concession is said to be the latest made to the US regulator in an attempt to ease concerns. I'm sure they are talking about a bunch of stuff. I don't know if any of it really matters. I think at a certain point they probably are going to try and look like they're bending over backwards to avoid going to court, but if the government really does want to go to court, the government is going to go to court, so I don't know if anything's going to stop them there. There we go. Take that victory, nice. I did play some Yu-Gi-Oh! Off screen after the last stream to get the daily quest done. According to Video Games Chronicles, Rockstar almost made an ECW wrestling game in 2000. An agreement was in place before Acclaim stepped in to do the deal instead. Which Rockstar really doesn't have any history, to my knowledge, of making a wrestling game, so it probably would have been pretty rough. I don't even know, as someone who hasn't played any of the GTA games, I don't know if there's even a section or a scene in GTA where they've ever even animated someone doing like wrestling moves. Hmm. This is one of those stories that kind of doesn't mean too much, but it might mean a small thing, small bit to the fans. Hideki Kamiya um, says Platinum could make as many nine Bayonetta games, which inherently, why say 9? Why not say 90, 900, infinity? The vice president says he can't conceive the Bayonetta series ever ending. It is certainly a little dangerous, particularly if they're going to just try to make a bunch of spin-off games. You may run into the Borderlands scenario where a lot of the spin-off Borderlands ate the lunch of the canonical numbered sequels to Borderlands. I feel like Borderlands 2 and Borderlands 3, well, particularly Borderlands 3, suffered because they had released Borderlands, the pre-sequel, and then fairly quickly after Borderlands 3 came out, they released Tiny Tina's Adventure, and then the Telltale Borderlands games also, I think, just made it so that there was too many Borderlands games all at the same time. So you definitely have to pace things out like that. And yeah, Bayonetta is going to have to probably go like a Mario Brothers series route where certain angels just become the default enemies in games, and you stop trying to introduce new types of enemies over and over again because they're going to run out of ideas. Koopas, turtles, things like that in a Mario game, showing up in Mario games again and again and again. I suppose this is good news. Like, you can't really take it as bad news. The opposite message would have been incredibly disappointing if he said, oh no, this was the last Bayonetta game, or we probably won't make another Bayonetta game. At a certain level, it would possibly be nice also if the Bayonetta team, if the people at Platinum had some other projects that they could work on, because they are eventually going to get burned out on Bayonetta. Either that, or they're going to drastically change what it is. And I think there's an argument that even right now, Bayonetta 3 kind of drastically changed what the Bayonetta series is, and the Bayonetta Origins game definitely is drastically changing what it is. And they are going to certainly have to struggle, because almost always the fourth game in any series does particularly poorly. So they're going to have to put a lot of polish into it. Like the core part of Bayonetta games also is built around specific encounters with enemies and specific fights. You can only make so many of those before you run out of ideas. Arguably, Super Mario 64 kind of shows that, in that the Bowser fights are pretty repetitive in Super Mario 64. Although, in all fairness, I guess Super Mario Bros. 1, the Bowser fights are pretty repetitive. Also, the fights in Super Mario Bros. 3 were pretty good, and the Doki Doki Panic Super Mario Bros. 2 fights were pretty unique. If I can have my daily complaint about YouTube moving all people away from AdSense into YouTube AdSense, or whatever it's called now. That is something it seems like they said they were going to do that at the end of last year, and here we are at the end of this year, and they are just now getting around to actually doing it. I don't think it really affects me much, but it does, I think, highlight that people with AdSense accounts that were YouTube content creators and making money from YouTube are not the customers that AdSense wanted. AdSense wanted customers that were going to buy ads and on Google searches and on YouTube. And so the people staying in the AdSense accounts are now almost certainly going to be treated better, and they'll slowly give them more better treatment and more attention. Although in all fairness, it really should have been separated out in the first place. It's kind of ridiculous to have AdSense as a service provider when it should just have been YouTube themselves that was paying content creators. And YouTube in general should be paying a lot more content creators. Myself included in that opinion. Let's see. Was there anything more that worth pointing out? I do think there is definitely still a love for Bayonetta, but maybe not as much of a love for the way the game quite played, or for repetitive things, because they certainly could have not had this been connected to Bayonetta, and they certainly, particularly as I understand the multi-dimensional nature of the story in Bayonetta 3, they could have changed the way Bayonetta looked, or killed her off as a character and introduced a new character instead. Or they could just introduce new games. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet are on sale for $35, 35 pounds at Curry's UK. I think the UK finally actually finalized their Brexit deal. That I don't think it was particularly a good deal for anybody involved, but that's just a foreigner's opinion, I guess. But it seems very much the case that nobody was happy with the way that was executed and implemented. Let's see. Video Games Chronicle says Metacritic revealed the worst reviewed games of 2022. I did have a bit of a backslide and start to listen to Game of the Year audio, which from Giant Bomb, which I'm surprised that Giant Bomb actually is doing Game of the Year, because they had been delaying it past the Christmas season, and it didn't seem like they were particularly that interested in the past couple of years. That although in the past couple of years there were completely different people in charge of Giant Bomb, so they're going back to the old way of doing it. But honestly, I started those podcasts playing and then fell asleep before they even started to say anything. There is a just weird situation if you were a Giant Bomb fan, like I was. Although I'm working very hard to not listen to any of it. Like, even if they get back to their core values at some level, and they are just doing things that the way Giant Bomb had been doing things 10, 15 years ago, back in the day, it's just everybody is so different now. It's just a completely different collection of people. It's the same issue like G4, is that even though they got Kevin Pereira and Adam Sessler, G4 definitely did not feel like it was the old G4. The sets didn't look the same. The people didn't look the same. Like, it was too much change for people who literally didn't want any change at all. and that's why they wanted G4 back in the first place. One of the things I think they could have done in the relaunch of G4 that would have helped is if they just had the new people being hosts to reruns of the old shows. Even though that's kind of dumb. Like, if you had, like, Gerard the Completionist and Adam Sessler sitting on a couch and watching old X-Play episodes and just doing almost like a director's commentary on it as it's playing, that could have been the setup, certainly, before any original content happened. Like, instead of doing the beach house idea that they did, which I don't even think the beach house idea before G4 officially relaunched was that terrible of an idea. Although it did really mess with expectations, as when G4 did launch, it wasn't anything like the beach house. And I guess they did that even more previously because they didn't... They brought back a lot of people who were on G4 for a special, and that special really made it implied that all of those people were coming back, when two of those people at most came back, and then most people did the one-time special, and that was it. Yep. So if we're going to talk about like worst events in gaming instead of just worst games of 2022, G4 and Giant Bomb, the collapse of G4 and Giant Bomb in particular, feel really bad. They're actually probably very good for the gaming community. If only we could have gotten like NeoGAF or Reset Era to also collapse at the same time. That probably would have been very good for the gaming community in the long run, but it doesn't feel good. It never feels good when something fails. Like, I still have some fanboy in me, even as a critic who frankly dislikes a lot of games and is very critical of a lot of games and a lot of things that happen in the gaming industry. I do want to see the gaming industry succeed, though I'm not to the point where I'm just one of those critics that would just like to see all video games fail and no more games ever be made. And I hope I never become like that. But yeah, as far as the article, Postal 4, No Regrets for PC, got 30 out of 100. Then Crossfire X, don't even know that game. Then Babylon's Fall. Then XEL, don't know that game. Then Ark of Alchemist. Then Zorro the Chronicles. That's a terrible name. It should be The Zorro Chronicles. Maybe that's what it really is called, and they're doing some weird editorializing. Looks like I'm gonna lose here. The Last Aura Crew. I remember that game being announced, but I can't tell you anything about it. Getting 50 out of 100. Waylanders 51. Kamawaza, The Way of the Thief, 52. And Blade Runner Enhanced Edition for the Switch, 52. What sucks about this, more than the fact that there were 10 really bad games listed on Metacritic, is that by the time you are at number 7 of all the games, starting at the bottom of the list of games on Metacritic, you're already to 50 out of 100, which just really highlights that if you were going to do a standard deviation, which is I think the right math here, most games should be severely lower scored. Like, the scoring system is broken completely and totally broken. And what we really need is like some cultural touchstones to give relative scores to, not actual numbers. Arguably, even if you just took all the games in order, like from worst to best each year, and gave them their each unique score, and then that might spread it out better. Let's see. Moving on, PlayStation's new wrap-up site lets players see their most played games of 2022. I don't know if this is useful or good information to release to people, to tell them how much of a gaming addict they are, particularly since as a PC gamer I leave games paused, and so the number of hours played would be really, really high. I severely doubt that the average PlayStation player played 90 games in the last year, possibly spent 1,400 hours. I would be somewhat willing to believe that. But if you're going to play 90 games and 33 of them are PlayStation Plus games, then a lot of these games would almost certainly have to be really short games you only played for an hour or two, which would not line up with 481 trophies, if I was to guess. And if over a third of your gaming is FIFA, I don't think you played 90 games at that point. I watched a YouTuber basically just spoiling from beginning to end the entirety of the original God of War game. Yeah, the game needs probably a remaster and re-release, but I'm not sure it would quite work as a remaster and re-release. If anything, it probably just needs a straight up remake, but I don't know what you would call it even, since we already have the rebooted God of War series. Yeah, I don't know what you would really do there. But I think there probably is an argument that you should try to sell some kind of remake that latches into the nostalgia of people who did play the original God of War games. There's a lot of them. Let's see. We're still winning, but it's still taking too long on these games. Hogwarts Legacy Switch and last gen versions have been delayed. The PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series versions will release in February as planned. So they're just straight up delaying the older gen versions. They may very possibly cancel the older generation versions. Also, Watch Dogs Legion is coming to Steam in January. Ubisoft recently started re-releasing its games on Steam. I feel like Watch Dogs Legion never has been on Steam before. It's a hard argument, certainly, to potentially argue to play Watch Dogs Legion. If I was going to play any Assassin's Creed-like game, I would play Assassin's Creed 3 and work my way continuously through that series up to the reboot of Assassin's Creed Origins. And if I was going to play Watch Dogs 1, I don't know if that inherently makes me feel a big need to play Watch Dogs Legion. I don't even think there's particularly anything really wrong with Watch Dogs Legion. It's just, I think, a medium game that probably doesn't have that much of a reason to exist. Let's see. Insomniac Spider-Man appears in the Spider-Verse 2 trailer. Spider-Verse 2 being the Sony movie. I think it's a Sony movie. Definitely seems like the Gwen Spider-Woman, Spider-Man character is going to play a big role, and that this is going to be more of a romance than just a comedy as far as Spider-Verse 2 goes. You can see there's multiple spider people. Which maybe that means that the Spider-Verse 2 is going to be a little too grown up for the fandom that liked the first Spider-Verse. Or maybe not. Maybe the timing is just right. I don't know if there's anything to be super hyped about it. I also wouldn't be surprised if, like, the noir black Spider-Man and the anime spider character, I wouldn't be surprised if they don't show up at all, and we get instead a new collection of spider people. I wouldn't be surprised if Spider Ham or the Spider Pig character doesn't show up. I wouldn't be surprised if the original old Peter Parker in the first series doesn't show up, since he got a pretty good wrap up to his story. I guess I could watch this trailer just to interest myself. I'm not going to show it because it'd be content ID. Like in the first seconds, they show Miles Morales and the Gwen Stacy. It is a Sony picture animation thing. I guess if Sony kept on pushing animation, with Disney really failing to make good animations, or good new animated movies, Sony Pictures does have a slight chance of success there. But I imagine what would happen is Sony Pictures would be incredibly cautious and only make one animated movie per couple years, which is not enough output. Right, so the old Spider-Man seems like he is in the movie, and so is the Excelsior guy that died quite a while ago at this point. A guy who pretended like he created a bunch of the Marvel characters, but really mostly was stealing credit. What is his name? Everybody liked him, except for people that worked with him. It seems like what's going to happen is that there is going to be a interconnecting citadel, like in Rick and Morty, of different spider people. But it does seem like it's going to be more drama and possibly more action, and that they're going to show, at least in one scene, a lot more of the Spider-Man in different ways they've been depicted in different forms of art. But I bet that's one giant fight scene, and that's pretty much it. The movie is coming out June 2nd. And then, at the very end of the trailer is an advertisement for the PlayStation 5 for kind of no reason. Yeah, I don't think Sony has just got the funding or the boldness to make enough animated shows, and leaning heavily on Spider-Verse only and not making original shows is gonna hurt them. Like, if anything, Sony should have been working on a Winnie the Pooh cartoon. With the Winnie the Pooh going into public domain, and Sherlock Holmes cartoons should have been made by somebody, since Sherlock Holmes is mostly in the public domain, if not all in the public domain. That's still being fought out, I think, in courts. The vast majority of Disney shows and movies were based on public domain stories. So a Cinderella by Sony would make all the sense in the world. Yeah. Sony would be the only one that has even a chance of having deep enough pockets to literally just copy every single Disney movie. Start with like Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, some of those ones that were made in the 40s, 50s, 60s, and just saying, hey, we're doing our versions of these, and you can try and sue us, but meanwhile, we're going to release a new movie based like this over and over again, and that there's nothing you can do about it. Now, arguably, they couldn't maybe do some of the ones that were originals. I think maybe The Lion King is somewhat of an original story, so if they tried to make their own Lion King, they might be in trouble. But Cinderella, Rumpelstiltskin, things like that, Sleeping Beauty, Robin Hood, all of those stories are public domain. There may be some elements that were unique to the Disney movies. And we are seeing that on Netflix. I don't know why I'm talking about this instead of video games, though. But Guillermo del Toro, if I can pronounce his name, has his new Pinocchio stop-motion animation movie on Netflix, now available to see. Speaking of Netflix, I also finished watching Big Mouth. Yeah, the season wrapped up, and it looks like there's probably room for another season. I don't think the whole story wraps up, and I think there's a slight danger that they probably should wrap up the whole story at some point. Otherwise, there's going to be some hanging plot holes as far as the story that exists there. For the most part, it would just be who ends up with who and what the relationships really are. The best way you would end Big Mouth, obviously, would be to have them all graduate and go to a different schools or go to college, and at that point they all break up with each other and have other relationships with other people. Back to video games. They are also mentioning here that Insomniac is also working on a Wolverine game for PlayStation 5. Which, yeah, we haven't heard anything about that in a while. A painting in Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion has a Getty image watermark. Which, I guess that's Square Enix pulling a Capcom almost, since there was that story of here's the watermark. I was looking down here for it. I'm like, I don't see it. Game developers need to be way better at not using temporary art that isn't just bright white nothingness. Like, there's just no reason to have temporary art in your projects in the first place. Getty Images has its own problems of stealing things that are public domain and then putting their claim of copyright onto it when they really haven't done any work. And that's not exclusive to Getty Images, but this is a problem of people being too quick in professional environments to just right click and save an image as, and then hoping that it works better, that somebody fixes it later and nobody notices it. And that certainly screams that there is a lack of QA work, lack of QA testing for Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII. Clearly Square Enix is trying to rush out games faster and faster and giving less and less funding towards the development, or maybe the developers that Square Enix is keeping employed are getting worse and worse as they got rid of some of their Western companies. This is big news if true. Apple is reportedly preparing to allow third-party app stores and sideloading onto iOS. Upcoming European Union regulations may make it necessary. That seems to me like that could definitely change things. It certainly also bolsters the argument that Microsoft is trying to make sometimes with their Activision Blizzard mergers, that they want to actually own King and the Candy Crush people so that they can make a Microsoft App Store to directly compete against the iOS App Store and Google Play. Now, inherently, there's not much, if anything, that stops Microsoft from releasing, even now, a competitive app store on Google Play, and yet they haven't announced or released anything like that. Microsoft, even if they don't acquire Activision Blizzard, is in an interesting position to integrate its Xbox Live service into a mobile app store service. And Microsoft already has a fairly established set of procedures as far as processing purchases and refunds. So they really are like the best company to make an alternative app store that is there, unless you want to give money to somebody like Facebook or PayPal. I guess Zelle might be in a good position, or any banking storefront might be in a good position to handle the financial aspects, but they're not really in good positions to handle just the idea of purchasing and selling things. Amazon.com could have their own app store, certainly, if they wanted it. See how this goes. Activate this by banishing this. That literally did nothing. Well, that sucked. I think this guy is possibly immune to everything with all the attachments on it. Let's see. Call of Duty on Game Pass would have a notable impact on the subscriber numbers, analysts claims, which never listen to analysts, really. They don't know anything at all, particularly about video games. I would say. I'm making a massive assumption there. I have no experience with analysts at all, but I would say it's relevant to listen to them even if they're not 100% accurate. It's not going to move the opinions of people as far as the people in charge of approving the merger or not. Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collections release dates have been confirmed. The 10-game compilation will arrive in April. I feel like maybe there was, maybe there just hasn't been a collection of the Battle Network games, but I feel like some of these Battle Network games have been released on at least Steam. It says, according to this, Battle Network 3 through 6 were re-released on the Wii U Virtual Console, but the first two games were only ever released on the original Game Boy Advanced incarnations. And people did like the Battle Network spin-off enough to obviously have 2 volumes of re-releases of multiple games. And they were definitely doing a Pokemon thing in which there's red and blue versions of the same game. Yeah. I think I may be done for today. Yeah, more and more I'm getting drained by Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, yes, we have until the 18th, so basically 4 more days to try to get, if I could get to 16 and get another 5 tickets, that would be great. If I could get up to 19 to get the last bit of gems, that'd be great. If I get up to 20 and then barely even play in the second round, that would probably be fine too. And once you get to the second stage, if I was to barely play, I would get at least 10 more Duelist reward tickets. If I could get in the top 10,000, I would get 20 plus a couple of kind of pointless things. If I could get in the top 1,000, I'd get another 10 tickets. That's probably asking too much. I guess it's mostly a case where I'm just trying to, I just need to play to try and get these done. Maybe I will just have to play off screen a lot. Meanwhile, special summoning, destroying cards are just not happening. This does put me in a weird position, certainly, where I'd like to spend the rest of this day trying to program that QR code trick, but practically I should just be playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Taking it easy. But part of the problem certainly also runs into the fact that when I'm not streaming, I'm paying even less attention, not more attention. If you can even believe it, I pay even less attention when I'm not streaming to playing Yu-Gi-Oh! And I do just get really distracted and stop playing halfway through a game. Then usually that causes trouble. Okay. Let's open 10 packs here on this. We'll get 1 ultra rare. What we're looking for here is new ultra rares, definitely, but in particular we're looking for just new cards. If we open secret packs with keys, that's great. If we don't open secret packs with keys, then that is even better because that saves gems. Having too many options is probably better than having too few options with the secret packs. But if we don't get a single key to a secret pack, I would be more than happy to live with that. Although I'd be confused as to why I wouldn't have gotten a key to a secret pack opening this selection pack. It almost feels like they've maybe changed the way that works. I should have gotten the key by now. At least one. Kind of feels like the sound effects have been a little bit toned down also. Maybe that's just because I turned the audio down. Well, I am confused. I should have gotten at least one secret pack key. And we didn't. Audio-wise, that was very disappointing. Card-wise, that was actually very good. I guess the question just comes down to, is there still an argument to buy another 10-pack here? I think the answer is yes. And this may just work greatly. This may work really well. If I can't get secret packs at all, then I am just free to open these packs. See, that makes no sense at all. Now we've got 2 secret packs opened. I guess, had a terrible run of bad luck. Nothing really forces me to open another 10 packs of this selection pack now. I have plenty of time to think about it later, as long as I get an ultra rare, which I did get an ultra rare, so no issue there. What maybe is happening is that I'm not getting keys to secret packs that I've already gotten secret packs for, but even that wouldn't make sense in the last 10 pack opening. Maybe you don't get keys to secret packs if you've gotten all the cards from that secret pack, but I don't know if there's a single secret pack where I have every single card in that secret pack. Well, I am doing some gacha, like, loot box opening here. I should mention that my favorite mobile game, the lewd game Destiny Child, at the moment, they're not even really announcing it. There's a higher draw rate on the crystal improvements of items that you put on the gacha characters you have. So there's like weapons, armors, accessories, and then soul card cards that you can put on them. If you get a weapon, a armor, or an accessory up to its max level, then you can further optimize it and improve upon it. Yeah, there's still a lot of room to open yet another 10 packs here. Maybe at that point I would have the best odds of getting any more of these super rares and ultra rares. But you can in crafting the gems that you put on the items, it is kind of a gamble to see the quality of those upgrades and the stats, the number odds of getting a high ranked gem or higher. And since I haven't been doing anything with those gems, I have hundreds and hundreds, or I had hundreds and hundreds of gems that I could burn through. So yeah, I probably put an extra hour or two into that also. I don't know if it's really worth going for either of these. But I think we have enough gems for this. But what we're looking for is just one ultra rare in each of these selection packs. Or these secret packs, not selection packs. Because the system here is different than the system there, in which the pickup cards that we're looking for are only 4 of 8. So your odds are about half as good that you would get what you're looking for. And I imagine what's going to happen, or what should happen, is that I'll unlock these kinds of secret packs over and over again over the months / years of playing this game, and be able to dip my toe every now and then into getting more of those cards. Or I won't actually need to use the secret packs to get specific cards in anyways, because I'll just already have earned them in some other way. This is too many card pack openings though, at this rate. And that's what's gonna happen, is that we're gonna start to open more secret packs. Yeah, well, I'm bored of this, so let's just go ahead to this point. We've got a lot of new cards, mostly rares and normals. One ultra rare in the entire 10-pack draw. So yeah, there would still be somewhat of a decent argument to doing this one if you're just gonna continuously push for super rares and ultra rares. But in actual comparison, I think, as we're unlocking other things, not cards included, that's all 7,000 of them, the featured cards. Yeah, you have like the fake raws and stuff like that, fake god cards. But overall, I think this is probably a bad secret pack to pick. This one's probably a terrible secret pack to pick. Yep. Let's see. This one's not bad. So we'll spend another 1,000 here as we're running out of cash. Did we get a single ultra rare? Yes, we got 2 ultra rares and 3 super rares in that. And that unlocked yet another secret pack. So how do we look now? Again, if you're desperate for super rares and ultra rares, this wouldn't be a terrible choice, but it is definitely not a great choice. Let's check this one. I bet we have most of these cards. Nope. So let's do that. Go ahead and skip. Find it. We're running out of gems now. Got 3 ultra rares, 3 super rares, and a bunch of new cards. Unfortunately, it still is really just new cards that I don't think are worth anything. And I only have enough to buy 10 more packs. So if I was going to do this one, yeah, that's not a good candidate. Let's see. Is this a good candidate? I bet it isn't. It's not a terrible candidate, but it's not my first pick. I do think that most of these secret packs, still, even amongst their featured collection of cards, are just not giving you the cards you need. And it's not logical to open these packs these ways. Alright, we'll do 10 packs here. Nope. You know what? We won't do 10 packs because the problem here is if I did 10 packs here and then I didn't get an ultra rare, then I'd be guaranteed an ultra rare when I buy the next 10 packs, but I couldn't buy the next 10 packs without spending real world money, and I still want to stay very much free to play. So we'll open 10 packs here just as a refresher, and even at that we're getting quite a lot of new cards. There's just so many cards, so many pointless cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! Let's see, cards included in this pack are up to 7,000. If I went to my cards and tried to filter down just a little bit through this, you can see we probably have somewhere around 30-40% of all of the 7,162 cards being shown in the Master Pack selection. And if I was to come over here, since we opened a bunch of things, we can dismantle all extra cards to get 10 extra super rare points and then several hundred normal and rare crafting points. And then if I was to scroll down this way, I don't know if we've moved the bar very much as far as cards that we own. Feels like we could have been here and we've gone down to here. It is just going to be a slow grind to get to that last third of all the cards, because I imagine this last third of cards are mostly super rare and ultra rare. Although in all fairness, I have to point out, I'm in a way better situation here. A year, it feels like that we've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. It feels like it's been a year, compared to even just 2 months of playing Marvel Snap. Because Marvel Snap, I feel like I'm almost completely there. I probably am close to 80% as far as collecting all the cards, and a lot of cards have been upgraded quite a bit, and it's going to create a situation where the only reason to even continue to play Marvel Snap is to specifically try and collect 4 or 5 different visual variants on the cards instead of actually being interested in playing the game or having any kind of level of progress as far as unlocking new content, because I just don't think there is going to be that much new content once you hit that top line with Marvel Snap. They are adding new locations, but they're eventually going to run out of ideas for locations. Moving on with the news, Private Division will publish a new sci-fi horror IP from Bloober Team. The game is not expected to be released before calendar 2025. I wouldn't be surprised if this is actually a Silent Hill game, since Bloober Team wanted to be involved, and I think maybe was announced to be involved with some of those Silent Hill projects. Yeah, they're the upcoming Silent Hill 2 remake they're involved with. So they're saying it's a new survival horror intellectual property, so I guess maybe that tells you directly it isn't the Silent Hill 2 remake, but who knows. Could the Silent Hill 2 remake deal have already fallen through? Possibly. It really is an announcement for an announcement that for a game that won't come out until at least 2025, 2 years from now. Hollywood's new Super Nintendo World is going to officially open in February. The first US Nintendo World will feature a Mario Kart AR ride. So, do we have any real details on this? Because we kind of know the Japanese Nintendo World was rather small, and this one is going to probably take a lot of ideas as far as the Japanese Nintendo World, which I think this is what they're basically just showing is footage of the Japanese Nintendo World. And they're going to try and expand it to take up more space and accommodate more people, I would imagine. So Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge, augmented reality ride, character meet and greets with Mario. Is that really a Mario, or is that a digital Princess Peach? A Toadstool Cafe, a 1-Up Factory shop. So there's a restaurant in that. If that is supposed to be the layout here, let's see if we can pause on that. Like, if this is supposed to be the general layout, it looks slightly different than the Japanese one, but not by much. It definitely doesn't feel like it's anywhere as big as you would think it would be. And the Japanese one had like at least 1 or 2 roller coasters, and this seems like it doesn't seem to imply any roller coasters at all. They may be cheaping out and making it very small. Inherently, you don't want to go to any kind of carnival like roller coaster type event in the first year anyways. That's just like you don't want to go to a restaurant in the first year until they fix all the kinks and get the operation running fairly smoothly. Plus it probably would be really expensive, but I could definitely see with the ever-increasing prices of Disney World and Disneyland that more people would opt to a Nintendo World and a Universal Studios trip instead of right now. Most people go to Universal Studios as their 3rd or 4th day in Florida after being at Disney World for 2 or 3 days. But I definitely would want to have them offer a lot more, and particularly for Nintendo stuff, you've got a fan base of older parents and just older adults, and so you want to probably try to accommodate them somewhat too, and not make the entirety of the place far too small with far too kid-friendly rides. Although mostly it will be kid-friendly, obviously. But there should be something for the adults, and I'm not sure I really see anything for the adults here. Most of the people I think that went to the Japanese Nintendo World probably were as many adults as there were kids. Moving on, GTA Online's latest updates adds new story content and ray-traced reflections, which I guess for people playing GTA Online, they may like that, although they may not really care at all because they may be too busy just gambling in the casino. December's PlayStation Plus game catalog and classic titles have been confirmed. We have a nice list here. Let's see. Yep, there seems to be a fairly long list of what seem like mostly old games. Heavenly Sword for the PS3 getting ported, possibly for the first time, maybe not. Yep. PlayStation clearly, as far as PlayStation Plus Premium, heavily relying on successes of decades past. That there's not a lot as far as new games that they have to offer at the moment. Here's that story I was talking about before. CD Projekt is investigating Witcher 3 issues on the PC following the next-gen update. Players are reporting technical problems following the patch's release. Which, yep, that is not what you want to have happen when you release an update. And our last Video Games Chronicle article says God of War TV show details revealed as Amazon greenlights the series, which I guess that means in testing, The Last of Us Amazon Prime Video is doing well enough for them to want to double down on that. Let's see, Last of Us airs January 15th, so yeah, they probably have seen some test shots of Last of Us and are happy with it. Of course, The Last of Us and God of War are fairly similar stories. A guy and a girl in Last of Us, a guy and a boy in God of War. So you might get a little repetitive there. Alright, we're now at our Gamatsu articles. An arcade naval combat simulation game called Waves of Steel launches February 6th for PC and later for the Xbox Series. I don't think I'm going to be particularly interested in that game. Sonic Frontiers sales have topped 2.5 million, and I've seen some indications that maybe Sonic Frontiers is slowly gaining some steam. People are being able to overlook the bugs and just generic problems of the Sonic Frontiers concept enough to build a new fan base, build a following. Let's see, Blaze Union's Story to Reach the Future remaster has been announced for the Switch, iOS, and Android. Is this a fighting game? It says it's a turn-based RPG game. Interesting. I've never heard of it. Let's see, Disgaea 7, Disgaea Private Academy First Period. What is Disgaea trailer? Available if you want to check out that trailer on Gamatsu. Fatal Frame, Mask of the Lunar Eclipse for the PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Has details its setting and characters. I assume this means the location, not the in-game settings. Oh yeah, that was one of the things that was really annoying about Dropsy, is that there's literally an achievement for going in at the beginning of the game and turning on squeaky shoes since you're playing as a character, and then playing the game long enough to get the achievement because squeaky shoes are enabled. And the achievement implies to me that you probably have to take 9,000 steps to get that achievement, which is a really long amount of time. 2/3 of the entirety of the game is the estimate I saw. So if you just don't turn it on and then listen to squeaky shoes the whole time, or turn off sound effects, which makes Dropsy even worse of a game, you won't get that achievement. Which that's super, super annoying. Part of the problem with Dropsy is that you run around trying to make people happy and hug them, and I think there was at least one character in the game that was added in a beach DLC that was added way, way too late, like many, many years after everybody had forgotten about the game Dropsy. And I think there's at least one character there that is unable to be made happy, and so you just can't do anything about it. Nor can I find a walkthrough that would even tell me if I'm correct about that character being unable to be made happy because nobody bothered to make a walkthrough for the DLC that was added to the game after the fact. There's a whole beach section that you just would not have been able to access originally in the game. I'm a little surprised, getting back to Fatal Frame. I thought this game was already out, but I guess they are just doing the standard Japanese thing of slowly teasing and announcing this. Although it may also be a case that there has been a Fatal Frame game that was released in the past year or two, and I'm just overlapping my thoughts about that previous Fatal Frame game with this Fatal Frame game. Interestingly, this seems to take place in a haunted infirmary and sanatorium, which is not usually where Fatal Frame games go. They usually are in kind of the same forest area over and over again, and the same kind of feudal Japanese buildings. Moving on, a game called Pocket Bravery is going to be published by P-Cube. Is this a fighting game? Yes, it is. Is it being released for everything? Yes, it is. I don't think this art style is going to particularly be that attractive to me. Even if this was a mobile-only game, I don't know if this art style really works. Yeah. I don't know how you would make a mobile-only fighting game. You'd probably want to make it more turn-based. Or make the fighting itself fairly automated just by button mashing in the corner. That might be a better way to do it. Because like a fighting game, it's going to have 6 or 8 buttons in an arcade. And so you're coming from that input and the history of that input. So doing that on a touchscreen just does not make any sense. So you probably should drastically automate almost all of the fighting in a fighting game and basically turn it into like a Telltale game if they had ever made a Telltale game around a fighting game conceit. Moving on, The Last Spell launches Q1 of 2023 for the PS4, PS5, Switch, and PC. No Xbox this time. Does this look like a top-down RPG Diablo clone, it looks like? Let's say it's a turn-based RPG. This is what really kills me. So it's more of an XCOM type game. Watching all these trailers, I'm gonna just skip the rest of that. Let's see. SpongeBob SquarePants has the boss fight trailer if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot DLC adds Bardock Alone Against Fate, launching January 13th. This isn't Bardock, though. I think this is Bardock. Or, yeah. This is Frieza, I think, unless there's another Frieza-looking character. This might be Kakarot, but maybe not. Maybe Bardock doesn't even refer to a specific character. I am far, far, far behind understanding what's going on with the Dragon Ball Z series. Or Dragon Ball series in general. A game called Atone Heart of the Elder Tree is coming to the PS4, Switch, and PC on July 27th. It's currently available for Apple Arcade. Interesting, no real next generation here and no Xbox. Just PlayStation 4, not PlayStation 5. Although it does seem like it's a fairly simplistic game. Apparently it's a puzzle rhythm game by the tags. So yeah, at that level, looking at this, it doesn't really feel like it is a game that would particularly benefit from being on the PlayStation 5 instead of the PS4. Yep. Unfortunately, this looks like it's too much of a rhythm game for me, so probably wouldn't play it. Otherwise, it does kind of look interesting. Outzone, Truxton, Twin Cobra, and Zero Wing for PC all launch February 14th. These are all old, I think, shoot 'em ups. They are Toe Plan shoot 'em up games, classic games. I don't think there's really too much more that needs to be said about that. The shoot 'em up genre of games in particular feel like a genre of games that just don't have enough relevancy that you would really want to go back and play these games, or that I personally would want to go back and play them. I didn't play them when I was young, so I don't have any nostalgia for them, and they tended to be incredibly short if you had infinite amounts of quarters, and incredibly simplistic in that case. I think I actually did play this game, but yeah, these definitely feel like they're just being emulated ROMs. Guess they're still advertising Discord and Twitter. But even the fact that you have to use a QR code to get to Discord instead of a simple @ handle on Twitter shows how @ handles make more sense in a new service. A company called PlayOn, PLAION, is going to publish a boxing title called Undisputed for the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and Series, and PC. I've been looking for a good boxing game. I hope this is a good boxing game. But definitely is no guarantee of that. Even looking at these screenshots, it looks like it would be somewhat rough. You have this one image that looks really nicely visually polished, and then once you start getting into the brighter lighting and the ring, you see there's just like nothing in the background, and somebody covered in tattoos but being well lit with a kind of cutout line around it. It does not look great. And this video I know is blurred, but this looks particularly bad. I hope it's good though. When it comes out, it would be very nice to have even a moderately good boxing game on Steam. Although what I really want is more of a rhythm punch-out game than an actual boxing game. Oni Road to the Mightiest Oni Physical Edition launches April 21st in the West, according to Gamatsu. Fairy Fencer F Refrain Chord is coming to the West in 2023 spring for the PS4, 5, Switch, and PC. Hogwarts Legacy for the PS4 and Xbox One have been delayed to April 4th, with the Switch version launching July 25th. We already talked about that. Furu has trademarked a game called Cry Machina in Japan. This could be possibly a Cry Star sequel, but that's basically just speculation. We already talked about the Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection launching April 14th. Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden for the Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC has some details for new features. Higher resolution graphics, choose your difficulty level from the start, quick save, and album, which that could certainly help quite a bit if you have quick save and you can change the difficulty from the start. Although choosing your difficulty from the start may just mean a slight difference from how the game plays out, because it may ask you 20 minutes in to choose your difficulty. Looking at this screenshot, though, for what I assume is Persona 3 Portable, you can see it's pretty low polygon on this character, and then somewhat low polygon on this character, too. And I don't know what the deal with this character is, but it seems like she's maybe topless and splayed out. So I guess maybe if you could set it to beginner mode and you could just never die in a Persona game, that would help quite a bit. And if there was a quick save before every fight, so you didn't have to start from some spawn point and wander through a dungeon to get back to a fight, that would be great. So all sound like good additions that potentially are better, better versions of the game. Although I still am very much leaning towards just not bothering to play any of the Persona games. It seems like it's just too much work, and really they should reboot the series and do it with modern graphics. That would catch my attention way more. Just start with Persona 1 and maybe merge the events of Persona 1 and 2 and 3 together, if you can do it that way. That way you could speed some stuff up, get rid of a lot of the grind. See, Mobile Suit Gundam Battle Operation 2 for PC has been delayed to 2023, which that really doesn't mean much of anything. Like, we barely have 17 days left in 2022. Famitsu review scores for issue 1776. Let's see. Avery Attorney Definitive Edition getting 33 out of 40. Cosmo Dreamer for Switch getting 30 out of 40. Dragon Quest Treasures getting 36 out of 40. Very highly rated. So another, I guess, well-received Dragon Quest game. And then Need for Speed Unbound getting 32 out of 40, which isn't the greatest review ever, but it's still kind of high. If anything, it probably does highlight that Need for Speed's Unbound, going with kind of more of a anime look in its cars and its characters, didn't by itself convince Famitsu to give it 35 or anything really high. Well, I'm also not really hearing any complaints about Need for Speed Unbound and its visuals, where I could have seen in a reality where people really hated those visuals. I think we had already talked about this Multi-Blood Type Lumia gameplay trailer, although this is actually a different gameplay trailer showing the Count of Monte Cristo fighting a different girl, which just highlights that they're putting out too many trailers. And I don't know if there's really a good reason to put out that many trailers. Octopath Traveler 2 has the Throne and Taminos trailer, if you want to check that out on Gamatsu. Naraka Blade Point is coming to Xbox One on December 22nd, and a Nier series collaboration has been announced. New content inspired by characters and weapons from the world of Nier. So it seems like it's probably a one-way collaboration, and that you'll have 2B outfits and things like that. I don't even really remember what Naraka Blade Point is as a game. Let's see if we can skip through some of this. Even at that, this dress is not quite the dress that 2B wears. So they've gotten rid of some of the laciness and see-through elements. Yeah, Apparently, Naraka Blade Point is a battle royale action game. So, it's not even what I thought it was. I thought it was more of a single player action Neo type game. Alright, are we going to see any real gameplay here? Apparently this is the real gameplay for that character. Yeah, that definitely doesn't seem particularly interesting now that I actually see the gameplay. Let's see, a game called Process of Elimination launches April 11th, 2023 in North America and April 14th in Japan. In Europe. I don't recognize any of these characters. Let's see. Came out on May 27th for the PS4 and Switch. It feels like it might be very similar to like Danganronpa, in that you just have a lot of potential suspects, a lot of weird anime personality characters. Let's see, we already talked about Private Division and Bloober Team announcing a partnership to publish a new survival horror game. Gamatsu has that article also. Let's see, more details from Octopath Traveler 2, if you want to check that out. Chocobo GP version 1.4.0 update launches December 21st, adds a Midgar course and 7 new series and more. I guess a course is a road, or a series is a combination of roads. Let's see, PlayStation Plus Classics. I think we have already covered this. You're getting a lot more detail in the Gamatsu version of this, in which they're talking about each story and doing a brief synopsis. Most journalists take press releases and edit it down into what they think is more relevant. There is something nice about Gamatsu probably taking the full press release here and releasing it unadulterated. Because yeah, it's not that hard to just scroll down here and look at the bolded parts if you're only interested in the titles, where it is way harder to get descriptions of each of the games if you had looked at the Video Games Chronicle version of this article that only told you the titles. Let's see, a psychological horror survival game called Holston has been announced for consoles and PC. The demo will be out in January for PC. Feels like it's an isometric kind of puzzle, almost Resident Evil if Resident Evil was pixely and isometric in its views. There's a couple of games that are like this. Not any that I think I could name off the top of my head as being the iconic version of these types of games. I guess part of the problem is if you have just square isometric rooms and the layout of those rooms and the size of those rooms are fairly limited and won't change, you're creating a familiarity that's going to hurt the general idea of making a scary game. So it's probably not the best way to present a scary game. Also, the visuals of being pixely is probably not the best way to present a horror game. Alright. So we have Master of Magic as a game on Steam. That was the last of our Gamatsu articles. Now we're just looking at games released on Steam. Seeming to get a lot of mixed reviewed games in those first two for games that just came out. Midnight Village Story doesn't look good enough. Here's Crisis Core, which is rated very positively, so that should get a YouTube short. Potion Crafting, which I had on my follow list already, is rated very positively, so I may accidentally put that on the YouTube short again, which I guess it really doesn't hurt that much if that was what happened, if I made the same YouTube short twice. I've changed the way the YouTube shorts work anyways. This is another one of those art styles that I don't really know what you'd call this other than like pencil sketched cardboard cutout games. Some kind of psychological horror visual novel elevator game with cat girls. Does this deserve a YouTube short? Nah, I'd say no. The other screenshots aren't painting quite good enough of a game. Yeah, I'm gonna be cruel and say no to that and not even give it a chance. You know what? I'll give it a follow and then not make a YouTube short on it. Middle ground. Or I can dismiss this one immediately. This is probably a prologue game and it doesn't look that interesting anyways. Roller Champions is already mixed. Have we gotten some new push now to negatively review games on Steam? Is this even a... This is a PvP game. Like, it would be interesting if all of a sudden we started to see real... Here's a PGA Tour and NBA 2K bundle for $40. It's maybe not a terrible deal, but it also might not include any of the DLC, which you very possibly would want. I'm not going to make YouTube shorts on bundles, that wouldn't work visually. It wouldn't be the worst idea if there was roving bands of people negatively reviewing games to just make other games look good instead of actually playing the game. Steam already has kind of a way of fighting back against review bombing in that way. I guess you would call that review bombing, depending on their motives. Well, if they're reviewing the game not based on its actual content in the game, I would call that review bombing. Although Steam is sometimes called reviews based on the content in the game review bombing. I'm gonna put this on the follow list. This is interesting. But yeah, if there was kind of more reviews in the first couple of hours and the first couple of days of games, if Steam encouraged people to review their initial experience in games and then come back and review it when the game has been finished, that probably wouldn't be the worst idea also. Like, Steam very much could ask you to review or update your review every time you exit a application, and just say, hey, do you want to update your review? That'd be kind of annoying. I'm gonna say no to Find the Gnome. So yeah, you wouldn't want to annoy people with it, but if people are 2 hours into a game and most people are only going to play 2 hours in that game and they had a good experience, having those hype early reviews might be nice. Because right now what we are running into on Steam is irrelevancy by the small number of reviews, and the reviews not coming in until potentially 6 weeks to 6 months later. I'd almost say yes to this if I could figure out what kind of game it is. Yeah, we have an adult game. a 3D CGI adult game, Jessica's Life: The Beginning, a tall blonde girl and a redheaded girl. They seem to go to a beach and sunbathe nude or topless. The blonde girl has bigger boobs than the redhead. And then they run into a blonde guy and a African American guy with black hair. Blonde white guy, I guess. Yep. Seems like it's probably nothing. It's probably very much just a kinetic visual novel for $3.99. English only. Does not seem to have voice acting or full audio in it. Doesn't claim that. So that was our first adult game for today. Like, consistently every Wednesday we're going to see adult games. Yep. I've kind of fallen into this pattern. As long as I'm covering adult games where I'm going to be talking about adult games, that's not that weird. But also I've fallen into a pattern of more and more just describing things by an anime art style and talking about anime in general. Which, yeah, there's no way to be an anime YouTuber and be successful, so I'm not going to shift focus in any way, but I feel like when I first started my series I probably bent over backwards to never mention anime. But then again, when I first started my YouTube channel, even then, anime was not as mainstream as it is now. It's my gaming club. Looks not good enough. Nope to this one. I don't think this is visually polished enough. I'll give this one a follow, but it's not visually good enough for a YouTube short. Yeah, it is a mouthful, or it's a that's the wrong phrase. It's a heavy plate to describe something as being anime adjacent or like anime, because then if somebody doesn't know what anime is, or their understanding of what anime is fairly rudimentary, you kind of have to go through a master class of explaining the history there. There's a whole decade's worth of cultures around what anime has been, what anime is today. And certainly there's whole decades worth of cultures as far as what gamers and video games are also, even though we often see low effort bad games that seem to have not learned anything from the decades of history and culture around video games. I'll give this a chance, but I don't think this is actually going to be a good point and click adventure game. I'm still very much a sucker for point and click adventure games. Next adult game we have is Touhou Kimono Blast, which is a shoot 'em up game where there's a giant naked anime Touhou girl, magical girl I guess is probably the wrong description, and you're shooting off the clothing. There was several of those back in the day, and I guess in modern time, if you're going to make the same idea, you could have much more destruction and particle physics happen. But generally, as an adult game for $8.99, it still really doesn't feel worth it by any means. And the fact that this is also part of the Touhou collection of games made by a random collection of people, because apparently Touhou is open source, Um, makes it a little bit weird. I'm a little surprised there aren't more Toho games. I can show this next game because the screenshots are censored. Beauty from Wisdom is a collection of still CGs, and then you play Sudoku. And by the looks of it, there's maybe 6 or more images that you get and unlock. For $1.39 English only, that's not the worst offering, but it really does feel like you're just getting your chocolate and your peanut butter for no reason. If you want to see lewd images or nude images, just look at lewd images and nude images. Don't bother spending 20 minutes in between playing Sudoku. I doubt very many people are in the mindset to want to play Sudoku while they're being horny. Curse of the Eclipse. Yeah, I almost would say yes to this art style, but it's a little too crazy. What you would want to do here is you would want to have a fairly limited palette of lines. You probably would want your main character to be fairly solidly filled in with lines, and then most of the other objects you would want to be very minimal. So instead of having these lines going up and down showing a wall, there would just be a black wall there, or a see-through wall, and then you'd have the player just run into the wall when trying to move. Hapland Trilogy. I cannot for the life of me figure out what you would even do in this game. $5.99. Apparently there's a playtest. Point and click puzzles that were originally released as a flash game in 2005-2006. Alright, well, I'll give that a chance. Again, this is not visually interesting enough for a YouTube short, but I'll give it a follow in case there is some kind of actual fan base around it. I'll give this one a YouTube short. Aquarium Travels. I think we can say no to. It's just too visually busy. Way too much going on. Yep. And yeah, I would say it's probably been about 3 or 4 weeks now where I've felt like the balance of Western made adult games versus Eastern Japanese mostly made adult games feels like they are fairly balanced. There is noticeably some bundling going on, undeniably, between Wednesdays and about Saturdays at most, where we're not seeing adult games coming out on Mondays or Tuesdays. So my original theory that they were pushing everything to Friday was not exactly correct, but there seems like there was some truth behind my misinterpretation. Yeah, I'll give the side-scrolling shooter a follow, even though it's not really my style of game. It might also be a case that for games like this that is mixed reviewed already, seems like this may have been review bombed. I don't know why, but some of these games may very well have been in early access for an extremely long amount of time, and that's why they've got so many reviews now. One negative review here, one negative review, one negative review. Yeah, they're saying that there's a review bomb here because of 4 negative reviews. Bought this game 2 years ago and it's still in beta, still tons of bugs. and you're still charging $24. Are they literally still charging $24? That is a ridiculous price for what this looks like. Obviously, there is a fandom that really wanted this game to work, but that seems like that's a problem. This T for Two publisher. I feel like I've heard of that company before, but maybe not. Well, I'm not going to bother to put something like that on the fault list. It's not likely to get better. Sleep Paralysis, The Uncanny Valley. Interesting. I'm a little surprised that there aren't more horror games around the idea of sleep paralysis. That being said, this doesn't really feel like a game that is built around the idea of sleep paralysis either. Most people either see demons, not creepy, grudge monster girls, and usually they don't see them in opening doors. You usually see them either right on their chest or in a corner. So yeah, this looks too much like a just kind of a horror asset flip game to interest me based on its name. And yeah, I think I can go ahead and skip it personally for its quality too. Starcom, Unknown Space, Action RPG. I'll make a YouTube short around that, but it's not my kind of game. Blood Bay, Card History. I'll give that a chance. Little Gator game. That looks interesting for a little kids game. And then Baker Business 3. I'll give it a chance. And then Fright Night Legend. I think we'll say no to that. So then we're at our GameDeveloper.com articles, which I guess we're going to end somewhat early today, which I'm fine with that. There's a report that Microsoft is open to Call of Duty appearing on PlayStation Plus. We already talked about that. The company, The Chinese Room, releases a roundtables with Josh Sawyer and other developers. See, Obsidian's Josh Sawyer and streamer Smiyomura, I can't even read that, and more talk to The Chinese Room about making video games in a different kind of art form. Which, you know, I guess this is just basically like a roundtable talk podcast type thing, if you were interested in listening to it. I feel like The Chinese Room was the maker of a game I covered where you were playing as a robot and they were deciding whether or not your artificial intelligence was human enough to trick a human, that you were human, or at least that was the general idea, which is called the Chinese Room Experiment. But I don't even think that was really the theme of the game. The game more was just kind of a walking simulator with some puzzles. Apparently Twitch had an alleged hate group on its approved charities list. The inclusion of LGB Alliance and Autism Speaks raises concerns about Twitch's vetting process for its approved charities. LGB Alliance, I have no idea about. I do vaguely recall that Autism Speaks is a pretty bad charity in that they put out some commercials and some messaging that just was not well received by the parents and family of people with autism, nor well received by the people with autism And they have like nobody in their office whatsoever, or like nobody on their board with autism to give that kind of inside track experience to them and inform them. Which, yeah, there are high functioning autism people that could certainly be at least consultants. I don't know what LGB Alliance is, though. Let's see. The LGB Alliance has openly opposed the rights of trans people, which, okay. I guess citation needed has been frequently criticized. There is a citation here, at least, as a hate group. Its inclusion on on Twitch's list prompted requests from users from the Alliance charity status to be removed from the platform. There definitely are. I guess that's why there's no T here in the name, and it's just LGB. There definitely are some lesbians, gays, and bisexuals that are not happy with trans people taking a lot of the focus away from them, and trans people asking for something very different than what LGB people want, and trans people in general just being something very different than what LGB people are, because LGB people, it's all about their sexual preference. Trans people, it's about their sexual identity. And yeah, those two potential groups do clash quite a bit. Trans exclusive feminist is another phrase I've heard. Towards the end of November, Twitch caught similar criticism for having Autism Speaks in their approved charities. Unlike the Alliance, Autism Speaks has not been removed. This is inherently the problem of allowing people to do charity fundraisers on your platform, because then you're going to have to inherently endorse each of those charities and very much select and handpick which charities are allowed and which ones aren't. And frankly, Twitch could be a better business if they literally said to these charities, you have to give us some kind of kickback, or you have to pay us a percentage of everything that goes through us. Which, taking money from charities is slimy, but a small 5% transaction fee to even 30% transaction fee wouldn't be that weird. And once Twitch was making money, they could then spend that money to make sure the charities they allow are somewhat acceptable. The other way you do that is you don't take any transaction fee, and then you only donate to very specific charities, maybe one specific charity per month that is handpicked by Twitch. And then you can vet it that way without having to have a lot of people monitor things. Moving on, Apple will permit third-party app stores for Europe in 2024. Video game GameDeveloper.com here just saying it boldly and directly that it will happen, whereas the articles before said it may happen, or that it's possible that it's happening. Let's see. The Cuphead DLC, The Delicious Last Course, has reached 2 million copies sold. So, yep. That's a pretty big number, considering how difficult Cuphead was as a game, and as far as just people willing to go back to it and trying more. I was unable to beat the game on hard mode in Cuphead and get to the final boss. I was able to get to the final boss on easy mode, I think, and that's pretty much it. So I'm not really motivated to buying the DLC other than to just own it. What's interesting is apparently 1,000,000 equals platinum in video games, which I don't know if that is always the case. So they're saying they've gone double platinum by selling 1,000,000 units, whereas I don't feel like music records in the old days went platinum when they sold 1,000,000 records. I kind of feel like they would have gone gold or diamond when selling 1,000,000 records. Although I do know that you go platinum with records selling considerably fewer nowadays than you used to, and the numbers barely mean anything as a description. And we already talked about Private Division signing a deal with Bloober Team, rolling out new developer funds. Epic Games is going to be ending the service for legacy Unreal and Rock Band games in 2023. The show will not go on for much of Harmonix and Epic's older back catalog. I guess Epic owns Harmonix. I don't know when that happened. So this is definitely an example of them probably not bothering to try to renew the licensing deals for all the music and Rock Band games in particular, and them just not bothering to support old games. It does not make the Epic Games Store look better, certainly. That because the one thing that the Epic Games Store needed parity with to compete against Steam as a storefront would be the fact that almost every game that's ever been published on Steam is likely still playable on Steam many years later. Some games, of course, been removed and delisted, but it's a tiny percentage. The company Jagex has acquired the Scum developer GameSpires. That being said, I don't think Scum was a particularly well-received game. It seemed like it was somewhat popular for a while. Sold 1,000,000 copies under a month, but I haven't heard anybody say anything about Scum lately. Part of the problem is that Scum, I think, is just a survival game with a lot of running and gunning, and none of those games have been consistently popular at this point. People lose interest in them. Alright, we've got a fall list cleanup for a game called Ancient Gods, which is mostly positive, so I will put that on the wish list. Ancient Aliens, the game, doesn't have any relevancy, but I could see myself playing this and making an exception otherwise. At the moment, just going to give it more time, though. Of course, you run into the problem if you make a game based on the Ancient Aliens TV series, or a parody of that. Half of the people that believe in Ancient Aliens are going to play the game and say it's not accurate, or say it's making fun of people that believe in that, and then the other half of the people playing the game are hoping it is inaccurate and making fun of the people. So you have two very separate audiences there, and you're going to piss off at least one of them. Ancient Abyss looks good, so put it on the fall list. Mostly positive. Came out January 14th, 2021. We have Anatomy of Fear is mostly negative, with only 10 reviews. It came out in January of 2022, so we can take that off the fall list. Anarchy Wolf's Law. This game is still in early access. It came out November 2021. Should I keep this on the fall list, or should I just get rid of it? I mean, you've had a year to come out of early access. I think we take that off the fall list. Maybe if it comes out of early access, I'll catch it again. ampersand, ampersat came out May. 84% positive. Honestly, this is one of those actual rogue-like games. And I think the visuals just kill it, so I'll take that off the follow list. Among Trees seems to be well received and looks interesting, so I'll put that on the wish list. And is that the last game? Yeah, that was the last game of the follow list cleanup that I needed to do. Yeah, we still have a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh! That I should have played, but I mean, I just couldn't bother to put another 30 minutes of gameplay into it. Alright, so let's do a duel live. Meanwhile, I'll scroll through my Twitter and see if there's any more news that we need to talk about on this Wednesday. I probably won't do too much on Thursday or over the weekend, so it's going to be fairly laid back until Monday. I will stream on Friday, or I plan to stream on Friday. There were some storms going on, so at any point I could lose my power, lose my internet, lose my house through a freak tornado or something like that. Shift codes including Tribes of Midgard are now coming out. So there's always that small possibility that I just stop making content or stop live streaming. Apparently Tim Schafer opened up about Psychonauts series development nightmares, which is an interesting pun considering nightmares play a role in Psychonauts. Of course, him complaining about developing a game does not make him look particularly strong as the head of Double Fine, now owned by Microsoft. Let's see. I guess I lost my train of thought there. Yeah. Oh yeah, I was gonna say there is this possibility that YouTube is finally going to stop really emphasizing live streaming. I can't see myself immediately abandoning live streaming, but I could see rethinking it. Akiba's Strip Undead and Undressed is coming to the West in 2023. The idea of looking at the video game news and not talking about it seems kind of silly. The idea of staying up with Yu-Gi-Oh! And not streaming it seems kind of silly, so it does seem like there's an argument to that. I guess if I just was completely at the point where people aren't really watching me play Yu-Gi-Oh!, which, let's be honest, not that many people are watching me play Yu-Gi-Oh!, I could see giving up on the Yu-Gi-Oh! Part, but I can't see getting rid of the news and looking at every game that comes out on Steam. And if I'm not live streaming that, it would be kind of silly to pre-record that otherwise. People do still jump in the chat occasionally and talk to me, although a lot of them are just asking to play me in Yu-Gi-Oh!, which inherently also highlights that mostly people do just want to play random streamers on Yu-Gi-Oh! Which, in fairness, I don't think there is the easiest of ways to let's see. These are people that I think I have already friended or followed. Yep, so I don't have any like new requests, and these gift boxes never used. I want to point out artists are very upset about the idea of AI art. AI art is theft here. They've made this, somebody's made this this concept. Yep. And very quickly in the announcement of AI art was basically just announcements that everybody's job, regardless of how creative you may or may not be, is at the risk of being potentially severely reduced or replaced by artificial intelligence. Which, yeah, that's going to be a problem, and the easiest solution is just universal basic income for most people. Most people would be more than happy to lose their jobs if they had their needs met to a comfortable level. Here's that article. Tim Schafer opens up on the Psychonauts series development nightmares. During a recent interview with NME, I don't even know what NME is, he opened up on the development of 2005 Psychonauts and the 2021 sequel, which 16-year difference. Yeah, Tim Schafer's just not, I think, a particularly good boss. He definitely would be one of the first bosses that I would see them move to a more figurehead role and replace with somebody who's a bit more demanding and a bit more organized as far as being developed. The original Psychonauts, said Schafer to NME, was one of the worst crunches in his career as a game developer. Double Fine staff worked until 5 in the morning for days on end to ensure it reached its April 2005 release. We were just like, oh god, that was terrible, that was wrong, let's never do that again. I think he's pretty much said that before. Crunch continues to be a widespread issue in the industry, and Schafer empathetically stated that resorting to crunch is an indicator something went wrong. Either you overscoped or you lost some productivity for some reason, or something bad happens. He doesn't even know what, just something bad happens. The crunch for Psychonauts taught developers some lessons, one of which Schafer said was not to normalize it. Improving quality of life for developers is a priority, and just as important as the crunch doesn't become a reoccurring part of a studio's lifestyle. As long as you don't say that's normal, you say, how do we fix that problem? That's the important thing. It's a constant struggle to get better at it every game. In all fairness, no. I wouldn't say in all fairness, that's the wrong phrase. I use that phrase too much. Double Fine hasn't made that many games in that meantime. Let's see. Between 2005 and 2021, probably released maybe 6 games in total. And this is just saying, I'm working on it, I'm improving it. At a certain point, you have to actually work and improve on it. You can't just give false platitudes as far as crunch or anything else. This obviously is GameDeveloper.com quote mining what must be a much longer interview. Let's see what happens when we click here. Because there really should have been a lot more said, and there's nothing really being said at all about the development of Psychonauts 2 in those quotes. Psychonauts 2 was such a long haul. So many things went wrong. Just like the first game, we lost our publisher, and at one point it was such a roller coaster, and at certain points it really didn't feel like it was going to be good. Yeah. particularly when you just like look at his office, there's a lack of like technical organization here. You're just putting things on the board and kind of a more rock star type familiarity and laid back design. Tim Schafer also looks kind of swollen, I would have to say. Like from the last time I saw him, maybe put on some COVID pounds. Definitely looks older. And yeah, having Ataris in your office, having a TV with a cassette tape in your office feels like there's just a lot of distractions in that office that would only compound a lack of organization, a lack of productivity. Yeah, again, just disorganization. And if your boss is disorganized and he's making all the decisions at the end of the day, that's a problem. Or if your boss is distracted playing with a phone, that's a problem. Or at least I would say that's a problem. Cyan wanted to point out this Mist Through the Ages bundle, which would include the 2021 version of Myst Remake, Myst Masterpiece Edition, and Real Myst Masterpiece Edition. So if I were to buy this, instead of just buying this for $29.99, I could save about $6 for $23.99. Although it is just really crazy to have so many different versions of Myst on Steam at this point and not just bundle it in for free. It would make a lot more sense if in purchasing this Myst you get Myst Masterpiece Edition and Real Myst Masterpiece Edition. They don't sell the original versions of Myst or the original version of Real Myst. In all fairness, I don't even know what really would be the original version of Myst. It probably would be an Apple II game that would be completely unplayable on modern hardware without emulation. And then, yeah, Akiba's Trip Undead and Undressed Director's Cut is coming to the West. Experience the true ending via Katie's Route. So, Akiba's Trip Undead and Undressed was the original Akiba's Trip game that was not released in the West. Akiba's Trip being the game where you have fashion vampires and you're stealing their clothes from them after beating them up. Yeah, this seems fairly ridiculous that they would have even bothered to release this, the non-director's cut version of the game in the West. Like, I guess it's just like they released it, then they sold a bunch of stuff as DLC, and now they are releasing a director's cut that's just getting rid of all the DLC, which just highlights part of the problems with DLC too. Just trying to sell the same game multiple times over. Alright, well, I'm definitely losing momentum here, so I'm glad I didn't try to play for another 30 minutes, because that would have probably gone very bad. There are some more shift codes. I guess I should mention when shift codes happen. That would be one of the things that I would miss if Twitter did shut down, which, as I'm not trying to get too deep into what is potentially the downfall of Twitter, it does sound like we could see Twitter going bankrupt probably would still maintain its service, though, even if it did file for bankruptcy. I guess this might be an interesting experience to see how badly can Elon Musk, as the CEO, mess up the company before there's an emergency shareholder meeting that votes him out as CEO. Because so far that hasn't happened. Part of that, though, is that Saudi Arabia invested in Twitter, so they may be, it may be that Saudi Arabia, as a major investor in Twitter, may be more than happy to see the whole thing collapse. So, yeah. But yeah, Twitter's still working regardless of all the news. There was a CNN article. I happened to turn on CNN for the first time probably in over a year, and they were talking about Elon Musk saying follow and then doing an emoji of a rabbit face. And my first thought when seeing that is that's either a reference to Alice in Wonderland or the beginning of The Matrix 1. But apparently, according to CNN, it's a known QAnon thing. And I'm like, man, you really can't just say everything is QAnon related. Like, if it said follow Q, I would get it. Yeah, that almost certainly is a reference to QAnon. And not like Q from Star Trek The Next Generation. But if he's just being a edgelord and saying follow the white rabbit or follow the rabbit, I mean, you gotta kind of assume that he's not just being ridiculous and going for the most extreme thing. I do not want to live in a world where all of a sudden every single expression, like doing the OK sign, for instance, is being co-opted and labeled exclusively as some kind of nefarious action. And what was even worse about CNN, and this is a rare rant against CNN, and this is why I haven't watched CNN and just news in general, it's not just CNN, it's pretty much all of them, is that they had someone talking about this fairly innocuous tweet from Elon Musk, and their first statement is that it doesn't matter what he meant, it matters what it was what basically I and CNN interpreted it as. And you just can't run a world like that. You can't live like that. It doesn't matter if somebody meant to murder somebody. If I interpreted them sneezing as a threat on my life, I can shoot them in the face. No, you can't live within your own whole head. You either have to have a society that judges people based on the outcome of their actions, which is really all you can do, or you try very hard to have it somewhat be based on their intention, which is what the justice system somewhat does. It makes the difference between intentional murder and accidental manslaughter, homicide, things like that. But you can definitely not say this person should be executed or thrown in jail because you interpreted their actions as being murder, even if no actual murder happened. That's ridiculous. And that's not just the judicial system. If there are a lot of people that straight up live in a world that is 100% interpreted in their own mind, and they're just not connected to reality, or even trying to be connected to reality, based on observing real world actions and outcomes based on actions. This is kind of a pointless rant for me to go on, though, so on that dumb rant, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.